Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where every day I go in search of tech stories and try to get you thinking differently about areas that are transformed by technology that, let's be honest, you might not associate with tech. And although this might sound like the beginning of a bad joke, what would you get if you crossed a business analytics platform, technology, and the Avon and Somerset Police here in the UK? But a company called Qlik, spelt Qlik, teamed up with the police over here, and there is just a great story about the potential of data analytics in the police force in the future that I just felt compelled to explore. So, armed with a curious mind and a microphone, I invited representatives from both Qlik and the Avon and Somerset Police to learn more about the story and the difference that they're making together by leveraging technology. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK so you can join me, Adam Mayer and Will White in a conversation about all this, and we might even throw in a little Eddie Vedder and Sting into the conversation too, just for good measure. And if all that doesn't awaken your curiosity, I think you must have the wrong show. But let's get them onto the podcast now, and we can explore this together. So a massive warm welcome to the show, guys. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to jump in first? So I'm Adam Mayer from Qlik. I'll try and give you a brief a wrap up of my background. So I've been in tech for more years than I care to mention, but it's well over 20 years now. Started from kind of application engineering background and then sort of worked through product management and product marketing roles. So I've kind of been involved in all parts of a kind of product piece, whether it's selling it, supporting it in the very early years, and then more sort of product lifecycle management. So that's around kind of messaging, positioning, and go-to-market strategies. I've come from companies like Toshiba, Sony, Fujitsu, and Canon Europe. Bit of a pattern forming there, but really, I guess, from a technology perspective, I've been calling that my religion since my very early years. My dad worked at IBM, and I remember quite from a young age, he brought him this big slab of metal. It had an 8-inch built-in screen in it, and it displayed this white flashing C:\\\. And I thought, what's that? And then from there, I've kind of like, I grew up and cut my teeth in the ZX Spectrum, showing my age. But really, I guess I got my data geek on from analyzing data around failure analysis and sales data when I was at Sony, breaking the Excel row limit when there was one, if you remember that. And then I remember thinking there's got to be a better way of doing this, and this is where I found Qlik. Really sort of been a user on and off through my various companies, and now I've been working at Qlik for the last 5 years and loving it. And one exciting area about this role that I'm in product marketing is getting to talk to a wide range of people like your good self, Neil, and really exciting organisations like Avon and Somerset Police.
Well, you're in good company there, Adam. I too remember those ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64 days very well. And Will, we have you on the line too. Could you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm currently a temporary assistant chief constable with Avon and Somerset Police. So I've been with Avon and Somerset for 26 years. And so when you're starting to view things and using quarter of a century as your benchmark for time, then that gives you a bit of an indication of you're moving on in age. I guess my involvement with data analytics came in about 2015 when I was in local policing. And that's when the Troubled Families Programme came in. And we were using a multi-agency database to try and understand demand and need in our local communities in Bristol. So that really kind of got me thinking in terms of the use. From there in 2016, I went into a role predominantly around vulnerability, the detective world, and child safeguarding. It was the fourth lead for child sexual exploitation. And that was quite a new crime type we had to understand. And hidden harm, it's not something that gets reported by the public. We have to be proactive in how we identify it. And we did some really innovative thing with data analytics that just completely transformed our approach. So that really inspired me. 2017-18, I did a master's in applied criminology and evidence-based policing outside my work life. And that's absolutely shown me the potential for data analytics to target resources where they're going to be most effective. And then for the last 3 years, I've overseen our Directorate for Enablement Partnerships, where we can use that methodology. And I've tried to implement that over the thousands odd staff that I oversaw to really transform how we could deliver better outcomes for the public by being really targeted and focused using data where we could have the best effect in reducing crime and preventing harm.
Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to chatting to you both today and understanding really how technology, data analytics and policing, how all those worlds have collided and how you're working together to solve very real problems. But to begin with here, Adam, I've got to ask, what's the story behind the name of the company? I feel there's got to be a story there, right?
There is, yeah. I mean, the origin of Click, our kind of backstory, if you like, we were founded back in 93 in Lund, in Sweden. And our founders back then, Bjorn Berg, not the tennis player, as I found out after I joined, and Stefan, and I hope I get his name right here, Gestrelius, were the original founders of Click. But back then, it was actually called QuickTech. And it sounds a little bit Swedish, but it was an acronym really around the keywords of what they were trying to offer and solve. So it's quality, understanding, information, and knowledge. But just fun fact: the name was actually changed to ClickTech, where Click comes from, when they were registering as a trade name, because Quick as a word was too general. So what they actually did was replace the understanding with learning. So then it became quality, learning, information, and knowledge. So that's the kind of origin of Click, and it's quite an interesting thing. Personally, these days I like to think of our name being more synonymous with kind of getting access to actionable insights in as fewer clicks as possible.
Love that. And I'm glad you didn't lead me in with Bjorn Borg and then Stefan Edberg there. For a minute, I thought you were going there.
I almost did.
So for people hearing about Click for the very first time, could you just offer an introduction, Adam?
Yeah, sure. So if we sort of look back at the roots, Click was founded back in 93 in Lund, Sweden. So we're actually fast approaching our 30th birthday. But the original belief kind of still stands today. Click was founded on this belief that everyone should have access to analytics to really drive actionable insights. So fast forward today, we're a global company, still with that Swedish soul that we like to say. Just as a fact, we're operating well over 100 countries, a very strong partner network of about 1,700 partners that help sort of extend our reach. And some listeners that may already be aware of Click may think of us as a BI company, a business intelligence company, but actually now we're a kind of a full, truly open data and analytics company. And what I mean by that is we have a kind of independent data integration side of the business as well as data analytics. So they can operate independently, but we believe that you get the most power when they're joined together. So the data integration side of the business is really sort of formed through acquisitions, through companies like Podium, Attunity, and more recently Blender. And the analytics side, we've had several acquisitions around alerting and collaboration and notes and things like that. But if you think about, really nowadays, data is kind of like the lifeblood of every organization. And it goes through multiple industries. So we deal with, a wide variety or applicable to a wide variety of different industries. Typically, it's things like finance, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, and the public sector, of course. And our mission these days is still pretty much the same as when we were founded, but we also have this kind of vision of wanting to create a data literate world. And we're doing that by helping people, wherever they are across the entire kind of raw to business ready data value chain. So we help people be able to kind of free and find their data, wherever it is, whether it's on premise or out in the cloud, and then help them get that into an analytics ready state. And that's the kind of the data integration side of things, and then apply analytics on top to be able to really understand the data and ultimately draw out those actionable insights that are really helping to drive these modernization and really transformation journeys that everyone's working hard at these days.
And Will, can you tell me a little bit more about how data has been integral for managing changing crime demand during the pandemic? Because there has been, the whole industry, every industry has been through so many changes, but I would imagine you've seen that too.
Yeah, so I mean, when we started off our involvement with Qlik and use of data analytics, it was very much about trying to understand the operational delivery. What I'd say is the chief, when he saw the potential of it, he suddenly realized that it could touch every element of our organization. So going into COVID, it's really given us daily insights, but also future planning in terms of our demand. And I'll come on to that. But also importantly, we understand our resourcing. So on a daily basis, we understand who's self-isolating, who might be ill with COVID, and where our resources are on a daily basis. But also importantly, it allowed the public to report breaches, and we could map that instantaneously. We could have daily focusing of our resources to where those breaches were most likely or most frequent. But also it gives us a really quick feedback loop. So when we're doing enforcement with the penalty notices, we could quickly identify if there was issues around disproportionality. We could consult with our community, and we could very quickly learn and respond in relation to that. So it's very dynamic of what previously may have taken us months, we did in days. So within COVID happening and us realizing the change of lockdown, we could quickly stand up a complete response to that. That was a really dynamic learning mechanism for us. And in terms of demand, it's really timely. So mid-June to mid-July, we know historically is our busiest time of the year. Every year we struggle. The last couple of years, we've still seen the lag of the impact of that demand into September. So this year, we put in plans for that, and we had it timed to start roughly about the 14th of June. I was overseeing our demand a week before. On Monday, we were in our lowest level of demand. Sure enough, through the planning we've done with our data analytics, by the Sunday, we were struggling to keep out of our highest level. And the plans we put in place has absolutely impacted on that. So we can manage our demand on a daily basis, and we use Qlik to do that throughout the day, through all our staff, but we can also do it to plan ahead and put in very systematic changes to deal with the real challenges we have, such as in the summer.
So, Will, as you're using Qlik Sense across Avon and Somerset Constabulary, can you offer a use case that might be able to help listeners understand how that technology has enabled you to gain those detailed insights and actionable data for incident management and this resource? Because I think it'll really help just set the scene and help other police forces that could be listening understand the value that you're getting from this. Because
of the level I'm at, I tend to look at it in terms of how we've changed as an organisation in relation to use of the Qlik insights. So we talk about wanting to have a data culture, wanting to be data driven, and we're wanting to empower our staff. So in the old days, the information would be from analysts going to the chief constable, who would cascade down the direction of what they wanted to deliver. Now we're giving to the people actually doing the job information that gives them direct insight to help them do the job to the best of their abilities. So in my old world, I was in charge of PCSOs and local neighbourhood officers. So rather than being briefed by their sergeant through central information and tasking, now those members of staff can come on duty. They've got apps that will give them the intelligence, the incidents that have happened in the last 24 hours in their area. They can then go onto an app that tells them about their workloads, and they can set out their own work plan for the day, or their patrol plan, as we call it. And they will go to their sergeant and say, Sarge, here's my plan for the day. This is what I'm up to. Is there any other direction you want to give me? So we're giving the power and the information to the people doing the job. And what we call the My Work app, that workload gives them insights in terms of their own performance. So by providing people that are actually having the contact with the public exactly the information they need to be able to do the job to the best of their ability, we feel that we can really empower staff through that insight they get through access to Qlik and the apps it provides.
Excellent. And Adam, I would imagine that for any business, in particular a police, but when they hear a new tech project, that it might strike the fear of God into them and the upheaval that it could cause. So when deploying the ClickSense analytics platform to a client like Avon and Somerset Constabulary, how long does it take to get them up and running and integrating with existing platforms, etc., and avoiding those pain points?
Yeah, sure. So it's a good question. And at the risk of saying, it depends. Typically, we find customers, we can get them up and running pretty much from kind of initial deployment into production, normally in just a few weeks. But that's obviously with the right guidance, training, and technical assistance. So really, I guess you could say the time for a fully integrated and deployed implementation, of ClickSense in particular, really does depend on a few variables. Mainly the kind of, what's the pain point or the objectives that the customer is trying to achieve. That obviously, impacts in terms of the use cases that are in play, and of course the data sources in scope as well, because they can sometimes add a degree of complexity. Although at Click, we quite proudly and honestly say we are data agnostic. We can get, as long as you get access to data, we can get it into Click on the analytics side, as well as the data integration side. And in the case of Avon and Somerset in particular, we kind of followed the same advice that we did with all our customers, really. And that's pretty much starting small, looking for a small product where you can deliver and prove value, very quickly, and then grow on a kind of case-by-case basis where you can look to enhance and then integrate, kind of ClickSense further, because there are a lot of different capabilities that you can take advantage of. And I think in the case of Avon and Somerset, it's quite interesting is that implementation has really sort of evolved over time. I think, Will, you've been using it for about, as an organization, good 4 to 5 years now as well. But yeah, in terms of sort of deployment, it's kind of that starting small, think big, and get the value quite quickly. I remember speaking to Sean Price, a former colleague in Avon and Somerset, used to work for Click, now works for Splunk. But I remember he was saying when he was heading up the BI team within Avon and Somerset, they were within 2 weeks, his team were really being told they were adding back critical value within the organization, and they were then able to build on apps every week. So you can think of apps like dashboards, but that's where you can really start to discover, freely explore, and interact with the data through Click. I don't know, Will, if you've got anything to add to that in your experience.
Yeah, so I think we started in about 2016. And from our perspective, or my kind of looking at it from the outside, you can approach it in 2 ways. You can either try and get everything exactly perfect and in the best shape you possibly can before you go live with it, or you can open something up to everyone in the workforce and allow them to kind of organically try and build it and grow it. And we went with the latter, and with hindsight, I think that's absolutely right. So in terms of that, people have embraced it. And when you're trying to do what I've kind of talked about, empowering people, if they're helping to shape what those apps are and to shape how that could best provide them insight into what they do, then they're automatically going to be engaged with it. So as a result of that, when people have seen the opportunity, other people have come automatically to want to develop their own apps for their own parts of the world. And I don't think there's any part of our organization now that isn't using data in some shape or form to drive their daily business.
And we will have some people listening all over the world in law enforcement, and they're going to be where you were before Click was implemented there. So for those people, what are the key areas of opportunities where constabularies can expand their use of analytics to support even better outcomes in policing? Because that's the end goal here. But are there any key areas that stand out for you?
So there's things about performance, there's things about continuous improvement, there's things about managing demand, but there's also wider opportunities. So I'd probably give 2 examples. One is in terms of business efficiency. So our 999 calls, and our 101s, they're critical to us delivering a service to the public. So about 5 years ago, we had the national agreement that we'd answer 90% of 999s in 10 seconds. and we were under about 80% at that time and taking about 5 minutes to answer 101 and about 20% not being answered. As a result of the insight data's given us and some fantastic work by our people in our control room, we're now at a point where 99.9% of our 999 calls are getting answered, and the average answer time is just 0.7 of a second. And likewise, we've got an abandon rate on our 101s of just over 2%, which is tenfold less than 5 years ago, and an average time of 44 seconds. So that's really high performing in terms of a control room, and that's been driven by our data. The other end is the really complex that I used to oversee, and that's vulnerability. So part of what drove our chief constable to want to embrace this and some of the early innovators was we had a very tragic case probably about 7 years ago where a man was murdered. And when we looked into it, we saw the amount of contacts that he had had with our organization. And it was about trying to understand how can we use all that information to better understand vulnerability and need. And so that's exactly what we do. So we can understand those that pose the highest risk and those that are the most vulnerable by putting everything we have together. And we've got masses of data in policing, going through that blizzard to give a really clear picture to operational staff of who they should worry about and who we should be focusing attention on. So it covers every part of those business, but from an operational, those are the two different perspectives that I think would be really helpful for other forces.
And what I love about your stories here is how you actually come together to solve a problem using technology. But I've got to ask, what excites you both about the partnership? And Will, I'll put that one to you first.
So there's two aspects. So I see my role. There's people in our world that develop the apps for us and work with those operational people to decide what those apps are like. That's the technical side of it. I see my role as making sure we operationally implement that really effectively, and that's embedded and drives our daily decision making with our staff. I asked one of our best managers in terms of that to do a 4-month bit of work about what have we learned so far that we can use again to really accelerate our progress. And what he came back was not what I thought, not about processes, not about technical solutions. It was about people, it was about driving collaboration, and it was about driving partnership working. So the use of data brings people together, gives a joint understanding, and makes much better partnership working. And from our work with Click, again, what's helpful is the fact that Adam and I haven't met in person because there hasn't been the need. We've taken what they've produced, we've released it in our staff, they've been able to shape it to their purpose, and that's required minimal input from anyone to help drive that. It's something that can organically work with, build, and then that can drive our operational delivery. So those are the two bits that really excite me in terms of collaborative working, and also the way that it evolves very rapidly in its own way with the people using it.
I love what you've achieved there together without actually meeting in person, but we're using the technology. It's phenomenal. And Adam, what excites you about the partnership?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's great working with all our customers. Especially when you can help them get the best out of the Click products, or you can actually see how they're using the technology, the outcomes that's coming out of it, and in particular the innovations that they can start making out of it, and the difference it's making to their organization. So I think the partnership with Avon and Somerset in particular, like Will says, it's great that the technology gives that element of kind of self-service, self-support, and what really excites me there is, one, how they're pushing the boundaries out of it, but most importantly, how it's helping them to make a real, as you've heard, a real genuine difference in society and really making a difference. That's phenomenal, and that's really exciting.
And before I came on the podcast today, I was doing a little research, and on your website there, it says Click is committed to changing the world by making it easier for people to make more insightful, data-driven decisions and act upon them. And it's a great tagline. But Adam, what's your secret, do you think, there? And what advice would you offer to any organization in any industry that just wants to make more data-driven decisions?
Yeah, okay, sure. So I'll break that apart into two there. In terms of what's our secret, for a long time, particularly in the analytics world, our kind of secret sauce, as you like, has been known around what we call our associative engine. So Click is quite different to other BI tools in that rather to having to know a lot of SQL kind of code, where you can sort of query the data and start joining it up. It kind of does all of that hard work for you, and it brings that. It's associative by nature, just like our brains are. And the great thing about it is it doesn't leave any data behind. And what I really love about it is it offers not just visualization of data, but you can interact with those visualizations, and that's how you can do this free-form discovery on all the data that you give it. As you start making joins, you're not leaving any data behind. In fact, it's just all associations, and then we're constantly improving in the technology there to draw out those actual insights that originally the associative engine was designed a bit like a relational kind of database. You can click on something and then everything will flex around it to say, hey, this is what's associated to it, but it doesn't mean you've lost that data. You can also see what isn't, and that's kind of just as important sometimes, and you kind of get that hidden ha-ha moments that you may not have otherwise find. So that's the power of drawing out the actual insights. And then over time, we've kind of drawn out the ability to get more insights just by asking a question. So we've got our cognitive engine, that's our kind of AI piece in there, but through natural language, you can also ask questions. You can just click look at data, and it will draw out insights that it thinks are there in the data. So it's really kind of an augmented intelligence piece, augmenting the human, and the human element is really important there. So that's one of our secret sauce in terms of the analytics side. But I think if I just step out, if you zoom out and look at the whole portfolio, I think really it's about speed of value. And we do that through automation. We'll touched on that speed to value bit about getting those insights quicker, and how you can kind of democratize that use of data so people can get access to it. But yeah, speed of value, automation across that raw to ready data value chain that I mentioned earlier, that free it, find it, understand it piece. So that's really from about creating data pipelines and automating data warehouses. That can be a lot of heavy lifting involved in there, and we kind of simplify the more complex processes involved, and that's about getting data into an analytical ready state, and then all the way through to better understanding of the data, finding those actual insights, then to really take action. And now we can even help you create automated decision workflows that can be made based on that insight, and that's through the acquisition with Blender. So really, it can be anything. It could be from a simple alert that needs to be fired off to trigger an action, or you could automate the action itself and maybe update a CRM, or even kick off an order, or perhaps a service ticket, something like that. So all of that, when you combine that together, that's what's really driving the concept of what we like to see as progression from beyond the kind of term business intelligence as we know it today to what we're really starting to call active intelligence, where you can sort of take advantage of what's happening now in your organization. So that's kind of what our secret sauce is in how we can help organizations like Avon and Somerset are seeing today, and really pushing the boundaries, which is great. In terms of the second part of the question, what can you do more? I can probably break that up into 5 bullet points if you can spare me the time.
Sure.
First one is real-time decision making. So this is really about enable your organization to be able to work on the most freshest data available, so you can actually work on what's happening right now, rather than what's happened yesterday. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, is that need to be able to pivot on a coin and almost react instantly. And you need real-time data to do that, really taking advantage of the power of now, if you like. The second part, and I think Will really touched on this and articulated it well, putting data in the hands of more people. And from a technology standpoint, mobile is a great way to do that. We did a free recent research when it comes to police forces in particular. Analytics across the forces is widely available around desktop computers, but only half of those forces are providing access to people on the front line via mobile devices, smartphones and tablets and those kind of things, exactly like Avon and Somerset are doing. And that can be really, really powerful and impacting. Another piece would be, looking at predictive analytics and forecasting. Obviously, you've got to have a strong data strategy in place there, and ethics come into play as you start bringing in AI and this kind of stuff. But putting the effort in can reap some big rewards. And just as a kind of risk is sounding like a pitch, but Qlik can actually act as quite a seamless front end by integrating into engines like R and Python. We have great technology partnerships with DataRobot, Big Squid, and TangentWorks, just to name a few. That can really you can allow your data scientists to do the coding and what have you, but you can open up that work through Qlik, pushing data into those engines and pushing it back out quite seamlessly. So that can really help, again, democratize the data and get insights out to a wider audience. And another interesting part that I think Will kind of touched on a little bit was sharing more data in a responsible way, I guess, but with the right balance of governance in place. We're seeing organizations starting to look at sharing their important data outside of the organization where it can matter the most. So particularly in this kind of sector, we're starting to see like multi-agency crop up where they're sharing data for analysis with partner organizations. So I know, just quite a couple of other names, South Central Ambulance are a good example here. And we have a shining light example in NHS trusts like Wrightington, Wigan and Lee, where they're sharing out data across social services, fire services, hospitals and other police forces as well. Even in Somerset, a great example, but again, from some recent research, we've sort of only seen about 50% of police forces doing that. So we would like to see more. And I think that last really impactful example that Will gave around protecting the vulnerable, using that risk profiler app, that's where the kind of stuff where it's not just the police force that need to deal with that. It's, there's more organizations that need to get involved, and that's putting that the interests and protection of that person first, as it were. That's quite powerful. And then the last thing I'll kind of leave with is something that I'm quite passionate about, making people more comfortable with using data. So as Will said, that technology is just one part of it. That's the enabler, if you like, and it's really kind of the people and dare I say processes, that kind of holy triangle. They all need to kind of work together. And I've always maintained if you can put data in the heart of that, where you can enable and empower people with it, then that's great. But they need to be comfortable with it. So ways of upskilling them and kind of fostering a community where data is important, and trying to find the value that can unite them so that can spread across the organization. If they can quickly get access to stuff, break things quickly without really impacting the business, they'll get more comfortable with data. If you can sort of foster a culture where people can sort of enable others, that maybe they're at a higher level and they can teach their peers, that all helps. So really it's about improving that level of data literacy, because I think it is really an important skill set these days as reading and writing in the digital age. So it's not saying you need to be a data scientist, but just more comfortable with data. We're getting inundated with data in our work lives and in our personal lives, and the better we can sort of understand it and cope with it, it is really good. And just out of interest, Avon and Somerset doing a great job, but did you know there was well over 90% of police forces actually don't have a formal data literacy program in place? So I think that's a really great start. It's just, making data kind of at the heart of the conversation and getting people on board with it.
Love that. And I've loved chatting with you both today and what you've accomplished together without even meeting by leveraging technology. But before I let you go, this is a part of the show where I like to have a bit of fun with my guests, where I always ask them if they can share a song that has inspired them throughout their career, been the soundtrack to their career, or maybe just helps them get their head in the zone before going on stage or going into a big meeting. So, Will, what would your song be and why?
So, Neil, many of my friends will hang their heads when you ask me that. So you give me the license to talk about one of my passions in life. So I've been a huge Pearl Jam fan for the last 30 years, and probably my favorite song of theirs is Present Tense. Yeah. So in terms of what we talk about today, about being able to work in the real time with data and to be able to respond to the public and adapt our approach, I'd link it there. I'd link it from the fact, even Somerset Police, we try and be a learning culture and take what happened yesterday into learning for what we do tomorrow. And I guess from where we are with COVID right now, just people's welfare and the focus on mindfulness and trying to be in the present moment. All of those I'm going to link just to give an excuse to have my favourite song played again.
Well, what a great choice. And I do a very good, if I do say so myself, Eddie Vedder impression after a few beers. But hey, doesn't everybody, right?
Brilliant.
And Adam, what would your song be? You've got a big one to follow up there.
I do have a big one to follow up. This is really tough for me because I've got quite a wide. I consider I have a wide sort of taste of music, from ABBA to Zeppelin. Yeah. Even in my if you've read it in my suffered through any of my blogs, I try and put some music reference in there as well. So I was thinking that a good kind of intro song or kind of motivational song. I was going to say the White Stripes with Seven Nation Army, because I like a good thumping bass line, but yeah. I'm not going to go orange on that, because I was thinking about this, that it's not as good as Will's maybe, but because of I'm in the presence of greatness here with Will, I'm going to go back to my childhood. I'm going to pick a tune from a band called The Police, and with a little bit of a tech reference in there. I'm going to go for Walking on the Moon, because in terms of what we talked about in innovation and pushing things, that whole space race sort of pretty much started the tech industry, and with what's happened recently with the strides that they're making with SpaceX and Richard Branson's and Jeff Bezos just recently landed as well. I thought that would be an apt topic to put on your playlist.
Absolutely. Two great choices there. And did I tell you I do a good Sting impression after a few beers? Bit of a pattern developing.
Sounds like we can have a full karaoke session, Neil.
Definitely. I'm up for that.
But before I let you go, anyone wants to find out more information about Click, what's the best way of finding you online, contacting your team, or look at some case studies? What's the best starting point?
Brilliant. So, our website, nice and simple, click.com. So that's QLIK.com. I'd also call out a kind of independent site, the dataliteracyproject.org. That's the dataliteracyproject.org. Loads of great case studies on there, and it's not just a Click site. It's independent, and there are quite a few other founding members involved in there, Accenture and Expedia and the like. And we have good case studies on there, including AWS among Avon and Somerset, among many. And also, we haven't really talked about it, but I'd recommend people can check out click.org. That's really aimed around, we do a great work around corporate responsibility. So if there's any listeners out there that maybe a not-for-profit organization and looking to get more out of their data, that's a great place to go for resource as well. And I'd say you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, just searching for Click, and you can also search for me on LinkedIn and follow me on Twitter. My handle is Adam Mayer WRK.
Cool. And Will, do you have a web presence at all where people could connect with you?
Yeah, probably the best way is through the Avon and Somerset Police website. So I've got a profile on there, and there's all kinds of ways to contact me or the organisation or engage with us. So that's definitely the best route.
Excellent. Well, I think every business is searching on how they can improve and how they can make better data-driven decisions and measure those improvements. And the way that you guys have worked together to do just that is phenomenal. But more than anything, just a big thank you to both of you for taking the time to sit down and share your story. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. I really enjoyed it. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise. And thank you, Will. Appreciate your time. It's great.
I think interviews like this are why I choose to record this podcast every day, because we covered everything from business analytics platforms, the effects it's having on the police force here in a region of the UK, as well as businesses who are all actually just united in that yearning to make more data-driven decisions. And all that was washed down with Eddie Vedder and Sting. And it doesn't get any better than that, does it? So remember, please, if you've got a song you would like to add to our playlist, share a question, share your insights, your experiences, whatever it might be. My door is always open to every single person that listens to this podcast. You can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Twitter and LinkedIn is just @NeilC.Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger. Oh, I'm still alive.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.